Wow, here we are again. We are in our second excerpt on the 25th day of November 2019. We will turn over into a new century this year, and God has seen fit to leave us here. I was born in 1941. I don't know how to say that as centuries go, as years go, but a century is 100 years, and so 100 years is a time frame in a century, and so we're at the end of a century, and so I don't know how to say that either, but I'm saying it. It took Noah and his sons 120 years to build the ark. Can you imagine working every single day from daylight to dark, 120 years? Now, days were, in that period of time, we believe daylight was longer than it is now. You say, how much longer? I don't know. But I do know there are places on the earth, like in Alaska, where God has seen fit to have daylight be for a certain amount of months and dark to be a certain amount of months. And God has a way of doing things the way He wants to do them. And so 120 years to build the ark. It was 300 cubits, which is 450 feet long. 50 cubits, 75 feet wide. 30 cubits is 45 feet high. The ark was as long as a 45-story building is high, as wide as a 7 to 8-story building is high, and as high from keel to top. That's the bottom, the very keel, the bottom of the ship, to the top, as a 4 to 5-story building, probably resembling a barge. The ark apparently was squared on the ends. It only had to withstand the force of the flood waters, not to make headway in them. The ark was perfectly suited for its purpose, to preserve the lives of Noah and the people and animals with him. Noah and his sons did not have to round up the animals and lead them into the ark. When the time came to load the ark, Noah and his family boarded first. Now, this is very important to read this. God then brought the animals unto the ark. What a sight that must have been as the animals gathered by God marched on His command into the ark. Now, God is the one that made all the animals. And if God wanted to call them, He called them. He also gave man the authority over the animals. And if you will take that authority, which man did in that day, and God did it. All right. So we see Noah and his sons did not have to round them up. All right. So we also see that God Himself was in the ark and brought the animals to the ark. What a sight that must have been. As animals gathered by God marched on His command unto the ark. The biblical account of the ark introduces the distinction between clean and unclean beast. Many years later, the Mosaic Law recognized and gave the definition to that distinction. How it oriented is not known. Of clean animals, Noah was to take by seven each, 3 pair plus 1, and of unclean by 2, 1 pair, Apparently, the 7 clean animals was taken along to be offered as a sacrifice after the flood. God's design was for man to worship him. The only way man could worship God was through obedience. That's the only way man worships God today, is through obedience. We ask Jesus Christ, our knower, we ask him to forgive us of our sin, come into our heart, and save our soul. And he does that. And then we are to live as he would. When we sin, we get the repercussion of sin. I've had many, many, many repercussions in my life from sin. I have one in my life right now, gray hair. That is from the age is growing and from sin. I believe that in the 950 years that Noah lived, he probably didn't have gray hair. And so now we see things changing here. Now, that Noah was commanded to take the fowls of the air proves that the flood was universal. We can't bypass anything. We want to prove the flood was universal. How could the flood not be universal? The whole earth was flooded. Remember originally, when God spoke of the earth, he said the earth was void, without form, and wrapped up in water. The whole earth was covered with water, and God unwrapped it from that water. God had put a flood around this earth originally for one reason or another that we won't go into right now. Fowls of the air proves that the flood was universal. The earth would be covered with water, leaving nowhere for the birds to land. Further, the Bible states that God determined to destroy every living thing on the face of the earth. Nothing would escape that was not safely aboard the ark except sea creatures. Now, everything that was in the sea was not destroyed. It was living in the sea. Now, millions and billions of things that were in the sea were destroyed. How do you know that, Brother Peter? You can dig anywhere. Anywhere. I'm saying anywhere. Listen to me. On this earth, anywhere. You can go down into this earth with a bore, and you will pass through shale. Anywhere. This whole earth was covered with water, and there is crustacean on this earth, down deep in this earth where the flood took place, and there is crustacean. You bore anywhere, you'll find sea creatures, you'll find evidence of salt, of sea, that this was covered one time by the waters. Are you a person that has to have proof? You don't believe God? Well, go to the scientific community in this world and find out there's no place on this earth that you can bore and not find the fact that it was covered one time by sea. All right, back into the thing here. The Bible states that God determined to destroy every living thing on the face of the earth, knowing this would escape that was not safely aboard the ark except sea creatures. Once Noah and the animals were inside, God shut the door. No person or animal could get in or out. Noah and his family and the animals were in the ark 7 days before the first drop of water fell. The waters came from 2 sources. The waters are captured in the crust of the earth, and the waters in the atmosphere. Massive geological activity took place as God broke up the earth's crust and released the water contained there. Since the creation of the early earth also was enveloped with a vapor canopy which God broke up and showered on the earth. Now, Noah and his sons had never seen rain. Rain, R-A-I-N-E, rain from the sky. The earth was watered by dew. And there must have been earthquakes, thunder and lightning, the like of which the earth had never seen and will never see again. The waters built up on the earth for 40 days. It reached a depth of 15 cubits, 22 to 23 feet above the highest mountain. A depth sufficient to permit the heavenly laden ark to clear them. They floated over the highest mountain, which was Ararat. It seems that God used that mountain to gauge, tell us how high the water was. God's purpose in sending the flood was that all flesh on earth would die. Conservative scholars estimate that the earth's population in Noah's days was approximately 2.5 billion people. 2.5 billion people. Almost half of what is today. All but 8 died and are cited in the Bible as examples of judgment. It was the largest segment of Earth's population ever experienced the judgment of God at one time. 1 Peter 3:20. Go look at it. The flood lasted a little over a year, 371 days when it was over. Noah's sacrifice to God, who promised never to destroy the earth again by water, he set his rainbow in the sky as guarantee. God's promise stands as long as there are rainbows. The earth will be destroyed again, but the agent will be fire. 2 Peter 3:10 through 12. The earth's going to be destroyed by fire next time. By the way, I'm using a book called Wilmington's Guide to the Bible. Wilmington's Guide to the Bible. This was my college book. This was the book that when I went through college, with Wilmington's Guide to the Bible as my main book. This is Wilmington's Guide to the Bible right here. No better a Bible expositor on the earth today than Wilmington's book. Now let me tell you something about Mr. Wilmington. He was God's man. He did not put a copyright on this book. I can write anything I want or say anything I want or read anything I want out of this book and not bend or break any copyrights. There's no copyright on this book. He was God's man. There's no copyright, if you please, on the Bible. Any copyright that you have on the statement in the front of that Bible is from the publisher that published it and the man that put it together. But Wilmington put no copyright on anything he has in his books. You may publish it. I am publishing it. I'm publishing it right now over the World Wide Net with permission from Mr. Wilmington, who's in heaven, who did all of his work and died and went to heaven and left all of this work. And there's actually no copyright on any of the words in the Bible. I don't care who put them down, whether it was King James or any other person who made a Bible. If they're God's words, there's no copyright. God allows us to use all of His words, day or night, 24 hours a day, year-round, for the rest of the earth, without copyright. There's no such a thing as plagiarism in the Bible. I can write a verse exactly what it says and say it over the internet, and it's not plagiarism. I am not stealing it. I am using it with permission of God to pass it on. Somebody perhaps has not read it for themselves, and I have read it, and God's using me to put it on, just like He is many, many other people. After the flood. Let's look after the flood for a few minutes here. Noah apparently took to farming, as Cain had done in Genesis 4 and 2. The idea that man took a long time to advance to farming skills is foreign to Scripture. In other words, man knew farming all the way through. God put it in man's mind how to farm, what to do. Noah probably was not ignorant of the potency of the wine that he had prepared. His problem was that he had neglected to use proper caution. Since mankind had been in agriculture before, it is unlikely that no one had ever had wine before. In other words, we knew that this earth was in a drunken stupor before the flood. And this earth is in a drunken stupor again right now. There are billions of people on the face of this earth, and out of those billions, there are millions that are in drunken stupors daily. Not just on the wine that you drink and the alcohol that you drink, but they are away from God, and the devil has them duped in other things other than wine. Just imagine, this is to me appalling, that men and women and young people today are dying like flies, leaving tobacco cigarettes off and vaping. And they're dying by the thousands around the earth right now by vaping, putting stuff into their lungs that their lungs cannot control and cannot clean up. And they're whoofing it in when they go by in a car, and this great big puff of smoke comes out the window. They're drunk on this stuff. They're drunk on it. Their body is drunk on it. Their body's not functioning properly. And it ought to be illegal. That puff of smoke come out, the police ought to arrest that person, put them in jail for driving under an influence. They're driving, their body is influenced so bad by this, they're dying like flies. Here's a guy driving down the road. He takes this big gulp of vapor. His lungs say, I can't handle it. And a great crash happens. And here they are at an intersection. They say, I can't imagine what happened. What happened? The guy died behind the steering wheel. And here he was vaping, and he died behind the steering wheel. And now other people have died and ended up in the hospital and been maimed for life because of this one man's, what he thought was private, what he thought was his ability to do it. And because he could do it, he did do it, and it killed a bunch of other people. And this is where we are today. Noah became drunk and lay uncovered. The Hebrew verse reflects the literally, he uncovered himself. It was not a young and tired Noah who sinned, but rather the seasoned Noah who had stood alone against the entire world. Now in a moment of comparative safety, he sinned. You are never out of the sight of God. Not ever. When you sin, God covers you over and can't look on you. And for a moment, you have this darkness over you. Jesus said, immediately confess your sin and ask God to forgive you of it, and rejoin yourself with your heart will not be away from God, but you can allow your body to sin and get dead. The attitude of Noah's sons toward their father indicates that their attitude toward God, Shem and Japheth, were respectful and reverent, walking backward, and they covered their father's nakedness, and their silent action spoke loudly as a rebuke to Ham, Canaan's father, who was disrespectful and derogatory. Ham not only saw his father's nakedness, but literally gazed upon it with satisfaction. He not only told Shem and Japheth about their father, but told it with delight. This is a picture of the devil talking to Adam and Eve in the garden. Here he did. The devil stuck his head up through a person, and Shem and Japheth about their father, but told it with delight. Now, when Noah woke, he noticed something unusual, probably the way that his robe was laid upon him. After inquiring, he learned what his youngest one of his sons had done unto him, an act of homosexuality. Noah then pronounced the curse on Canaan. It should be noted that Noah's statement, chapter 9, 25 through 27, is really a prophecy in which prediction was made concerning each of Noah's sons and their descendants. It should also be noted that Ham was without specific blessing, and that the curse of verse 25 was only on Canaan. Ham had 3 other sons. He had Cush, Kosh, Mizraim, and Put, who were not included. Both Shem and Japheth were the recipients of a positive blessing, and Canaan was to be their servant. Noah actually blessed, listen to this now, Jehovah, the God of Shem, for the blessing he will shower on Shem in making his line the primary means of fulfilling the messianic promise made in Genesis 3:15, and that God would always make a way for mankind. So Japheth received positive blessing permanently of the territorial nature. Japheth would dwell in tents of Shem, predicted Noah. This expression indicates that Japheth would not conquer or displace Shem, but rather that the blessings he received would be because of his relationship to Shem. Paul expressed a similar thought when he pointed out that the blessing of the Gentiles have come because of God's blessing on Israel. Romans 11:18. God will break some of the branches off and graft in the Gentile church. Verse 17. which will not replace Israel, but will share in Israel's blessing. When God is finished with the church, he will remove the olive branch and graft back the natural branches again. Why did Noah curse Canaan and not Ham? Two reasons can be suggested. Because of Noah's prophetic knowledge of Canaan's wickedness, Noah's prophecy was a call to Canaan and his descendants to repent. From Canaan of the curse came the Canaanites, who were some of the most degraded people over the earth that lived on the earth. These were giants. These were people that were giants. These were people that were noted. They were seen. When God cursed him, he put a sign on him that people would see him. As he walked across the land, he would be 2 to 3, 4 times larger than the average person. Look at the giant that David slew that came out against the children of Israel. He was a Canaanite giant, 4 times larger than any man on the earth. And because Noah wished to punish Ham more intensely, Ham probably would have rather had the curse on himself than on his son. The curse on Canaan had absolutely no relationship to black people today. Black people descended from Put, not from Canaan. It's a fallacy to believe that the curse that God put on him was turn him black. That wasn't the thing he did. He put size on him so that he could be seen at a great distance. The curse was perpetually fulfilled when Joshua conquered the land of Canaan. It was further fulfilled in David's expansion of his kingdom and his conquest of the Canaanite territory. By the way, when the promised land that God promised the children of Israel was put up by Canaanites, it was there. Can you imagine how much food a Canaanite would eat? One of those great large people would eat? And here was this land full of these Canaanites, and God said, I'm going to give it to you if you will just walk up there and enter in, open the gates to the Canaanite land, and just walk in your presence with me in front of you, will drive the Canaanites out. They will run and flee from you. But there were 10 of those spies said, no, it can't happen. And the other ones that said it could were overruled. And therefore they spent 400 more years separated from God because of it. Phoenicia was a large Canaanite colony which was on the destruction, moved to in North Africa and carried on excessive warfare against Rome. The curse on Canaan was ultimately fulfilled in the Third Punic War. Rome went against Carthage and defeated it, killed all of the inhabitants, literally, scraped it off the face of the earth, and dumped it into the sea. That was in 149 to 146 BC. Now we're going into the place to where the Tower of Babel was being built, and how God had to deal with the people of that day, and the tragedy of the day of the Tower of Babel. And this is why we're here today, and this is why we speak many languages across this earth, and we'll see that in our next excerpt. Well, We're going to close out now at 29 minutes, and we will see you next time. Brother Peter saying bye-bye for the time. All right.